What's up everyone, Darcblade here with a Hunter's Guide to Arch Tempered Velkhana in Mhw Iceborne. Another monster in the game has received the Arch Tempered treatment, and this time it's Velkhana, the flagship of Iceborne. Arch Tempered monsters are a step above normal tempered monsters, and as a result are normally more aggressive, hit harder, have new or augmented moves, and have more health. So in this video, I'll give you an overview of the Arch Tempered Velkhana event quest, briefly go over some of its new moves and aspects, as well as the rewards you can get from it. Well, firstly, how do you access Arch Tempered Velkhana? Well, the Elder Dragon is locked behind an event quest known as The Place Where Winter Sleeps, a 6-star Master Rank quest that requires hunters to be Master Rank 100 or above, and has you taking on the Arch Tempered Velkhana in the Elder's Recess. In a way, it's very reminiscent of when we got to face Velkhana for the first time in the Monster Hunter World Iceborne beta. Lastly, it should be noted that this hunt is actually only 30 minutes long instead of the standard 50 minutes long. Now when it comes to taking on anything in Monster Hunter, preparation is half the battle. So when it comes to Velkhana, you need to be aware of what damage it can do to you as well as its elemental weaknesses. Velkhana is weakest to the fire element as well as the blast ailment. Failing that, going with high raw damage will also help when taking on this flagship monster. When it comes to your defenses, making use of the Iceproof Mantle is recommended, or Ice Resistance skill. If you're a stamina user, definitely making use of Blight Resistance is recommended, as Velkhana can easily afflict you with Ice Blight. Apart from that, there's no real essential skills that you need for this hunt, so you can go with what you personally prefer, whether that's offensive skills like Agitator, Partbreaker, or more defensive ones like Divine Blessing or Evade Window. But once you have your gear and items ready, head out on the quest to take on this new Arch Tempered monster. Now when it comes to taking on Arch Tempered Velkhana, the monster is a lot more aggressive than the standard Velkhana. However, it shares many similarities and many moves. When it comes to Velkhana's attacks, she tends to go in one of two ways. She either uses ice-based attacks, which will inflict you with Ice Blight and hit incredibly hard, or she will try physical attacks normally done with her tail, which has a surprising reach to it. However, most of these moves are clearly telegraphed and can be avoided. However, when it comes to new moves that Arch Tempered Velkhana has, there's a few that you need to take note of. Firstly, the move where she normally freezes the ground underneath you before an explosion of ice occurs. This is changed, especially when she's enraged. Instead of creating just one ice explosion, it'll be a cascading series of ice explosions going left from right from where the initial explosion occurred. On top of that, most of her other moves, especially when she's enraged, have extended reach. She also has a completely new move where she'll do a 360-degree spin on the spot before unleashing a 90-degree attack straight ahead of her, creating vertical ice walls away from her. This is a cool looking move, hits hard of course, but it leaves her vulnerable as there is a slight animation after performing the move, so take this as an opportunity to attack her via clutch claws or whatever you have available to you. Finally, when it comes to Arch Tempered Velkhana, as with all Arch Tempered monsters, it will use its ultimate move more often, so you've been warned. Now I cannot stress that with Arch Tempered Velkhana, pretty much a lot of its moves, especially its ice-based moves when it's enraged, can sometimes one-shot you. So reading them, avoiding them, or reducing their damage is key to survival. But just like the normal Velkhana, you can power down the monster, however it's incredibly difficult to power down Arch Tempered Velkhana. You do this by shattering the ice on the Elder Dragon's body. And whilst this is simple to do when it comes to the wings and the head, on the body is a little bit of a different story, especially the legs. So in some respects, spending too much time trying to shatter the ice on the body is not worth it, as you only have a 30-minute time limit for this hunt. Instead, focus on its weak points, i.e. its head, for maximum damage to get the hunt done in time, especially if you're using a weapon that does poorly against the monster's 4 legs. One last tip when it comes to fighting Velkhana is as you're fighting it in the Elder's Recess, in the starting area that you encounter the monster, Area 8, remember that there are 2 sets of rocks at the top of the area that can be dropped down on Velkhana's head. If you're able to put the monster to sleep beforehand, even better as well. So try to make use of them for some added damage. So what do you get for slaying Arch Tempered Velkhana? Well, there are 2 notable rewards, Velkhana tickets and Research Commission tickets plus. Whilst the Research Commission tickets plus can be earned via other means, the Velkhana tickets are unique to this event quest. But what can you do with them? Well, firstly, they can be used to craft the Velkhana Gamma armor set. a fantastic Frostcraft armor set with a ton of skills and dual sockets. Even if the skills on the armor aren't to your liking, it can be mixed and matched with other pieces of the Velkhana Alpha and Beta armor sets for a very functional set that makes use of that Frostcraft set bonus. On top of that, for completing the event quest for the first time, you'll also get the Arch Tempered Velkhana Shard pendant for your weapon. Finally, Velkhana tickets are very valuable as they can be used to upgrade various charms and create various layered armors, including the layered armor version of the Velkhana Gamma armor set, Guild Palace armor set, and Guild Works armor set. So there's lots of reasons to farm this event quest. But that's about it for Arch Tempered Velkhana. Like I said, the quest is well worth doing. The Gamma armor set is definitely powerful and strong, and whilst not all the skills on the armor set are great for every single weapon out there, overall it's great to have an updated Frostcraft armor set in the game. This, coupled with all the various upgrades that you can create as well as layered armors, makes this an essential event quest to take on. Now before I go though, normally when an Arch Tempered monster is released, I'll put up a gameplay showcase of how my first successful hunt goes against the monster, so I'm just going to stick it at the end of this video here. I do go up against the monster using a bow. I went with a raw attack bow, utilising most of the Fatalis gear. It isn't the best of hunts, it's not the cleanest of hunts, it does take a little bit longer than I anticipated, but I was experimenting as it was one of the first times doing the event quest. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed my first hunt against Arch Tempered Velkhana, and I hope this guide comes in useful. So until next time, I've been Darcblade, and I hope you enjoy the hunt.
Ha!